You'd think Harley-Davidson is done shocking people, but then the 2025 Street Bob showed up with a 117 engine for 16 grand, and everyone had to double-check the spec sheet. Because that's not how this usually works. You want the 117? Cool, that'll be your retirement money. Except now it's not. Harley just put their Torque King engine in their cheapest full-size Softail and called it a day. Suddenly, this stripped-down bobber is looking like the smartest buy in the lineup. Now, of course, everyone is interested. But where did this bike even come from? The Street Bob has been Harley's factory bobber since 2006, back when it lived on the old Dyna frame. It was the cheapest way to get into a 6-speed big twin at the time, running around 13 grand with that classic stripped-down vibe. Solo seat, chopped fender, all the bobber essentials without the custom shop markup. 2018 brought the big change when Harley killed the Dyna platform and moved everything to the new Softail frame with the hidden rear shock and the Milwaukee 8107. A few years later, the 114 engine showed up, which was fine but never felt like enough. The Street Bob always had the look nailed down, but the motor? It felt like Harley was holding back on purpose. That's what makes 2025 different. Harley finally stopped playing it safe and dropped the 117 into the cheapest Softail they make. 120 foot-pounds of torque in a bike that costs 16 grand. Every other 117-powered Harley starts at 20,000 minimum, and most blow way past that. Add in the ride modes and cornering ABS that actually work, and suddenly, the budget option became the smart option. This isn't just an update. This is Harley getting their pricing strategy right for once. And before anyone asks, yeah, the 2026 is already confirmed. Harley's keeping most of this setup intact, which tells you they got it right this time. We'll talk more on that later, but for now, let's break down what you're actually getting. First off, the proportions. 64-inch wheelbase, 19-inch front wheel, 16-inch rear. It sits low at just under 26 inches laden, which means most people can flat-foot this thing at stoplights without feeling like they're tiptoeing. The 3.5-gallon peanut tank and that chopped rear fender give it that classic bobber stance. No excess bodywork, no touring fairings, just a bike that looks fast sitting still. Harley's offering 5 colors for 2025. Vivid black is the base option, then you've got billiard gray, centerline, purple abyss denim, and iron horse metallic. The upcharges range from $350 to $650 depending on which finish you pick, but honestly, even vivid black looks mean on this thing. They also updated the tank badge this year with a new stretch diamond design based on a 1966 Willie G. Davidson sketch. It's a small detail, but it adds that heritage touch without being obnoxious about it. The motor is where things get visually interesting. The Milwaukee 8117 is mostly blacked out, but Harley added chrome highlights on the air intake and upper engine covers. It's not full chrome overload like some of their other models, just enough contrast to make the motor pop without looking like a rolling jewelry store. The new 2-into-1 exhaust for 2025 integrates the catalyst into the header and flows way better than the old setup. It's also got this deeper, more muscular tone that actually sounds like a big twin instead of a lawnmower with ambition. Wheels are standard black Annihilator cast aluminum, 19-inch up front, 16 in the rear, wrapped in Dunlop Harley-Davidson series bias ply tires. You can option up to painted aluminum laced wheels if you want that classic spoke look, and they're fully compatible with the tire pressure monitoring system that now comes standard. Yeah, TPMS on a bobber. We're living in the future. The cockpit is pure minimalism. Black mini AP hangers with internal wiring, so no messy cables flapping in the wind. The bars put you in that upright fists in the wind position, which is great for cruising, but will have you eating bugs on the highway if you're not careful. Harley offers lower drag style bars as accessories if you want less wind blast, but the mini apes are part of the whole bobber aesthetic. Lighting is full LED across the board, 5 3/4-inch LED headlamp up front with that signature position light ring, LED turn signals, LED tail, and brake lights. It's bright, it's modern, and it doesn't look out of place on a stripped-down bike. There's also a USB-C charging port tucked away so you can keep your phone alive without ruining the clean lines. The bike ships with a solo seat because bobber. If you want to carry a passenger, Harley sells an optional pillion for around $200, but let's be real, it's narrow, it's thin, and it's designed for short trips, not cross-country touring. your passenger will tolerate it for 20 minutes, maybe 30 if they really like you. Overall, the Street Bob looks exactly like what it's supposed to be. A no-nonsense factory bobber that doesn't need a custom shop to look good. Harley nailed the proportions, kept the lines clean, and didn't overcomplicate things. It's a bike that looks right sitting in your garage, and even better rolling down the street. Now let's take a look at the most interesting part, the engine. The Milwaukee 8117 is the reason this bike exists. Harley took their flagship torque monster and put it in the Street Bob, which is supposed to be the affordable entry into full-size Softails. Every other bike running this motor costs at least $4,000 more. The Lowrider S with the same engine starts at $20,000, but here it sits in a $16,000 bobber. And that pricing makes no sense until you realize Harley finally figured out how to build value without cutting corners. The 117 displaces 1923 cubic centimeters, or 117 cubic inches if you still measure displacement the old way. It's an air and oil-cooled V-twin, making 98 horsepower at 4,600 RPM and 120 foot-pounds of torque at 2,500 RPM. Those peak numbers don't tell the whole story because this motor was never built to compete on horsepower alone. What matters is how that torque gets delivered, and Harley spent serious time making sure this thing pulls hard everywhere you'd actually use it. 90% of peak torque leaves between 2,000 and 5,000 RPM. You can cruise at 30 miles per hour in 6th gear and roll into the throttle without downshifting. The bike just pulls without hesitation. Highway passing becomes effortless because you don't need to plan 3 moves ahead or drop 2 gears. Stay in top gear, twist the grip, and the 117 hauls you past slower traffic like they're standing still. Last year's Street Bob ran the Milwaukee 8114. The 114 made 94 horsepower and 119 foot-pounds of torque. So on paper, you're looking at 4 more horses and 1 extra foot-pound. Small gains until you understand how those numbers translate to actual riding. The 117 hits peak torque 500 RPM earlier and holds more torque through the mid-range, where most riding happens. Cycle World put both motors on the dyno, and the 2025 made 96.5 horsepower and 118 foot-pounds at the rear wheel, versus the 2024's 92 horses and 116 foot-pounds. That gap widens even more between 2,000 and 4,000 RPM, which is exactly where street riding lives. 0 to 60 happens in around 3.9 seconds on the new bike versus 4.2 on last year's model. Roll-on performance from 40 to 70 in 5th gear takes about half a second less. Launch from a stoplight and the 117 lunges forward with minimal clutch slip. Crack the throttle mid-corner, and the bike pulls hard without waiting for revs to build. This is what a proper big twin should feel like. Harley gave the 117 what they call the classic tune, which prioritizes broad usable torque over peak performance. There's also a high-output version making 114 horsepower and 128 foot-pounds, but that lives in bikes like the Lowrider S. The classic tune delivers 90 to 95% of peak torque from just 1,500 RPM and holds it nearly flat through 4,500. This creates a linear response that riders describe as effortless shove rather than raw aggression. The intake system got updated for 2025. Harley swapped the old integrated airbox for a prominent round filter in blacked-out chrome that sits on the right side of the bike. It improves breathability by about 5 to 7% over the previous setup and helps keep that torque curve flat without needing ECU remaps or aftermarket parts. Exhaust routing changed to a 2-into-1 design with the catalytic converter tucked into the header pipes. The muffler uses lightweight acoustic baffles that trap sound waves while letting exhaust flow freely. The result is a deeper, throatier rumble that stays under 80 decibels at full throttle. Dyno testing confirms this system adds 2 to 3 foot-pounds of mid-range torque compared to the old 2-into-2 pipes. At idle, you get that classic potato thump sitting around 1,000 RPM. Rev it past 3,000 and the exhaust gets aggressive with a full-throated bark. Highway cruising produces this powerful, resonant tone that announces your presence without being obnoxious about it. Heat management got serious attention this year. Harley added an oil cooler mounted between the frame down tubes that keeps oil temps 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the air, only 114. The right side of the bike still gets warm because physics and air-cooled V-twins go hand in hand, but it's manageable even in 90-degree weather. Independent thermal imaging shows peak temps dropping 20 to 25 degrees during stop-and-go traffic compared to last year's bike. The transmission carries over unchanged from last year. 6-speed cruise drive with belt final drive and the same gear ratios. These ratios feel more versatile now because the 117's displacement advantage means you can be lazy with the gearbox. Third gear pulls cleanly from 30 miles per hour without bogging. Sixth gear holds 100 miles per hour with power in reserve. Harley added 3 ride modes controlled from the left handlebar: Sport, Road, and Rain. Sport sharpens throttle response and minimizes electronic intervention. Road balances everything for daily commuting. Rain softens power delivery and heightens traction control sensitivity to prevent wheel spin on slick surfaces. These modes tie into the cornering enhanced safety systems that use IMU data for lean angle aware adjustments. In sport mode, the 117's torque can overwhelm the rear Dunlop if you're not smooth with inputs. Fuel economy stayed at 47 miles per gallon combined, despite the power increase. The 3.5-gallon tank gives you 160 to 165 miles per fill-in mixed riding. Harley recommends premium fuel at 91 octane or higher to avoid knock under load. Milwaukee 8117 elevates the Street Bob from solid cruiser to legitimate torque monster. The revisions punch above their specs with broader airflow, earlier torque peaks, and smarter electronics, delivering a real-world edge over the 114 without sacrificing character. Dyno curves prove it feels stronger across the entire power band. Acceleration bites harder off the line. Highway legs stretch further without constantly hunting for gears. This is peak Street Bob performance. Raw enough to feel properly Harley, refined enough to ride every day, and relentlessly fun everywhere in between. As for the suspension, Harley didn't reinvent it for 2025, but they refined it enough to make a noticeable difference. Up front, you get 49mm Showa, dual bending valve forks with 5 inches of travel. The big change is the switch from progressive rate springs to dual rate straight springs, which sounds technical, but translates to more linear response and less dive under heavy braking. Harley claims up to 20% less pitch during hard stops, and that tracks with real-world riding, where the front end feels more composed when you grab a handful of brake. The rear suspension is still that hidden monoshock setup tucked under the seat with 3.4 inches of travel. It's a coil-over design with cam-style preload adjustment that you can tweak without tools, which matters if you're switching between solo riding and carrying a passenger. Harley retuned the damping for 15% better balance front to rear, and the straight rate spring swap makes the bike smoother over rough pavement without losing that firm, planted feedback. The geometry stays aggressive for a cruiser with 30 degrees of rake and a 64.2-inch wheelbase. The bike feels nimble for something weighing 646 pounds, and lean clearance improved over last year by an estimated 1 to 2 degrees, getting you up to around 31 degrees before the pegs start scraping. Ground clearance sits at 4.9 inches, low enough to give the bike that planted stance without scraping over speed bumps. All these electronics are great, but they don't mean much if you can't reach the controls comfortably. The Street Bob sits low at 25.8 inches laden, which means most riders can flat-foot this thing at stoplights without feeling like they're tiptoeing. That confidence matters in parking lots and slow speed maneuvers, where you don't want to worry about dropping 646 pounds of motorcycle. Mid-controls come standard, putting your feet roughly beneath your hips for a neutral riding position that's somewhere between sport bike aggressive and full cruiser lazy. Harley offers forward controls as accessories if you want that stretched out look, but the mid-mount setup makes it easier to shift weight through corners and feels more natural for most riders coming from other bikes. The mini ape hangers put you upright in the wind, which is fine around town, but gets tiresome on the highway. At 70 miles per hour, you're catching full wind blast on your chest and shoulders with nothing to hide behind. Swapping to lower drag bars or adding a small windscreen cuts that pressure down. But it changes the whole bobber aesthetic that makes this bike look right. The optional passenger pillion costs around $200 and matches the solo seat styling, but it's narrow and thinly padded. Fine for short trips to grab coffee, not great for two-up highway runs. If you're planning to carry a passenger regularly, this probably isn't the bike. The Street Bob is built for solo riding first, and everything else is a compromise. Understanding who this bike is for starts with understanding what Harley actually built. The Street Bob sits in a weird sweet spot where it costs less than most serious cruisers, but delivers more power than bikes in its price range. That positioning matters because it changes who should be shopping for this thing versus who's better off looking elsewhere. This bike makes sense if you want a first Harley with real big twin torque, but don't want to jump straight into a 700-pound touring bike or spend lowrider S money. Starting at $15,999, the Street Bob undercuts the lowrider S by several thousand, while still giving you the 117 motor and Harley's full rider safety package. That's a massive value proposition for anyone who wants Milwaukee 8 performance without premium pricing. Bobber and stripped back Softail fans will appreciate what Harley did here. The Mini Ape's mid-controls, 3.5-gallon tank, and short rear fender give it a proper factory bobber profile instead of a standard cruiser with cosmetic edits. You're getting authentic bobber stance and character without needing to visit a custom shop or spend months building something yourself. Budget-conscious Harley riders finally have a path to the 117 that doesn't require taking out a second mortgage. This bike offers Milwaukee 8 torque, ride modes, cornering ABS and traction control, tire pressure monitoring, and Softail chassis feel for less than any other 117-powered Harley. It's simpler and cheaper than a lowrider S, but packs way more muscle and tech than an entry-level Nightster. This bike doesn't work for serious long-distance touring. The 3.5-gallon tank and lack of wind protection handle short highway hops fine, but long days at 70 to 80 miles per hour mean frequent fuel stops and full wind blast, unless you add aftermarket windscreens and luggage. If you're planning cross-country trips, a Heritage, Road King, or proper touring model makes more sense. Frequent two-up riding doesn't play to the Street Bob's strengths either. The bike ships with a solo seat, and the optional passenger pillion is narrow and lightly padded for short runs, not touring. If carrying a passenger is a regular part of your riding, you need something built for that from the factory. Track or drag strip use isn't what this bike was designed for. The 117 makes 98 horsepower and 120 foot-pounds, which feels great on the street, but the geometry, suspension travel, and mid-controls are tuned for everyday riding. The Lowrider S is Harley's better factory performance option if maximum cornering aggression or repeated drag passes are your goals. Looking at direct competitors, the Indian Scout Bobber runs a liquid-cooled V-twin around 94 to 100 horsepower with similar torque figures and a low slam stance. Feels like a compact performance cruiser that's lower, shorter, and sportier off the line. But it doesn't have the same low RPM shove as the 117, and the cockpit feels tighter for taller riders. The Scout Bobber excels at being nimble and quick, but it doesn't deliver that big twin character. The Triumph Bonneville Bobber brings a 1200C parallel twin making 77 horsepower, with strong mid-range punch and premium finishes. It's a refined, retro classic take on the Bobber formula with excellent build quality. But it doesn't offer the same big twin feel or dealer network that Harley provides. The Bonneville appeals to riders who value European refinement over American muscle. Harley's own Lowrider S runs the 117 high-output motor with more top-end power, taller suspension, bigger brakes, a 5-gallon tank, and a drag-style cockpit. It weighs around 670 pounds with a 27-inch laden seat height and costs over $20,000. The Lowrider S is built as a factory performance weapon for fast canyon, riding, and longer highway runs. It's better for aggressive riders who want premium features and don't mind paying for them. But the Street Bob wins on everyday usability and budget handling while delivering nearly the same motor. The Street Bob carved out a unique position. It's not trying to be the fastest, the most comfortable, or the most premium. It's trying to be the best value big twin Harley you can buy, and at $16,000 with a 117 motor, it nailed that target. The Street Bob makes a strong case for itself, but it's not the only bike in Harley's lineup worth considering. Depending on what you actually need from a motorcycle, the Sportster S, Nightster, or Fat Bob might make more sense. Here's when you'd pick something else. The Sportster S is the performance option. It runs the Revolution Max 1250, a liquid-cooled V-twin, making 121 horsepower and 93 foot-pounds of torque. That's more peak power than the Street Bob's 98 horses, and it weighs about 140 pounds less at 502 pounds running weight. The Sportster S also gets inverted forks, radially mounted Brembo brakes, and around 34 degrees of lean angle compared to the Street Bob's 31. On paper, it's the better performer, and it actually costs about the same or slightly less depending on trim. But here's the catch. The Sportster S is a high-revving modern motor that doesn't feel anything like a traditional Harley big twin. It makes power up top instead of down low, and the ergonomics with that wide front tire and feet forward position feel awkward to some riders on rough roads. If you want maximum performance per dollar and don't care about classic V-twin character, the Sportster S wins. If you want that low ARPM shove and more relaxed riding position, the Street Bob is the better daily rider. The Nightster is the entry-level play. It runs the Revolution Max 975, making 91 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque in a package that weighs about 485 pounds. The seat height is lower, the bike is easier to manage in traffic, and Harley dropped the base price to $9,999 for 2025. That's $6,000 less than a Street Bob. The Nightster makes sense if you're a new rider, if you mostly ride in the city, or if you just want Harley branding without committing to a full-size Softail. It's lighter, cheaper, and more manageable. But it's also way less bike, less torque, less presence, less of that planted highway feel. The Street Bob is more motorcycle in every measurable way, and if you can afford the extra $6,000, it's the better long-term keeper. The Fat Bob 114 is the angry brother. Same Softail family as the Street Bob, but with inverted forks, dual front discs, fat 150 front, and 180 rear tires, and a more aggressive stance. It weighs 675 pounds and costs around $18,899. Here's the funny part. It runs the smaller 114 motor now, so you're paying more for the chassis and styling, not more displacement. If you want that Mad Max aesthetic, better braking with dual discs, and don't mind the extra weight and cost, the Fat Bob delivers. But the Street Bob gives you the bigger 117 motor in a lighter, simpler package for less money. Unless you specifically need those fat tires and dual discs, the Street Bob is the smarter buy. The Street Bob sits in the sweet spot. More motor than the Nightster, more traditional than the Sportster S, cheaper and lighter than the Fat Bob. That's why it's the best value in the lineup. For years, the Street Bob was the cheap Softail cool-looking, blacked out, mini-apes, mid-controls, but always a half step behind the pricier models on power. The 114 was fine, but it always felt like it was working hard to keep up. Now, with the 117 classic motor, the bike finally has the grunt its attitude always promised. It still sounds mean, it still looks perfectly bobbed, and stripped down, and the new ride modes actually are interesting for its price. Yes, the tank is still tiny at 3.5 gallons. Yes, you'll feel some heat on the right leg in traffic. And yes, it's still a 650-plus pound motorcycle that doesn't like tight parking lots. But those are Harley taxes you already knew about. What you get in return is a bike that finally feels worth every penny of its $16,000-ish sticker. It's fast enough to embarrass most performance cruisers, cool enough that people constantly stop you to talk about it. If you want a simple, badass, American V-twin that rips, looks killer, and puts a grin on your face every single time you hit the starter button, the 2025 Street Bob is it. Now here is the 2026 Street Bob that you've been waiting for. But hold your thoughts and don't get too excited cause there's not much of a change. Harley's keeping the Milwaukee 8117 exactly as it is. The whole package carries over almost unchanged 2025 Street Bob. So what does change? Harley added a new solo trim option that actually starts at $14,999, which is cheaper than the 2025 base price. You get the solo seat, cast wheels, and dark billiard gray paint for less money. If you want the 2-up setup with chrome or laced wheels, you're looking at basically the same pricing as 2025, maybe a couple $100 different depending on the dealer. So the real story is Harley didn't add new tech or performance over 2025. They just gave you a cheaper entry point if you're cool with the stripped-down solo setup. That means if you find a leftover 2025 at a discount, it's the exact same bike for potentially less money. And if you want the 2026, you're not paying more for the same thing, you're just getting fresh paint options. But hey, maybe that's the point. Not every year needs a reinvention, just a reminder of what already works. And the Street Bob does work. So before you hand over your cash, ask yourself one thing. Do you want the newest Street Bob? Or do you just want the nameplate to say 2026? If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Harley fan or not, I think you would enjoy our video about 12 worst engines ever put into Harley-Davidsons. Enjoy this video and we'll see you on the next one.